Roman knows I'm Cheyenne from Oklahoma, where we were invited at gunpoint to live. I'm not sure if my earlier introduction actually went live, so I'm reintroducing myself. This is a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you today as we watch others celebrate their independence from oppression and taxation without representation. And we remember that the independence of others resulted in genocide for many of us. So I want you to think about there was a scientific study done that proved we carry the historical generational trauma of our ancestors within us. So I want you to remember also that while we do carry that historical generational trauma, we also carry the strength, the joy, the love, the laughter, the humor, the cultural continuity that is also within us. I would like for you to focus on that. These are challenging times, these are changing times. And for us as Indigenous people, we have been activists since the beginning of our encounters with Europeans who later became European Americans. And I always find it ironic that we don't refer to them that way. Uh, we hyphenate so many people: Chinese Americans, African Americans, uh, Hmong Americans. Just the list goes on and on. But only European Americans don't have a hyphen or don't have a two-word identifier. So let's talk about let's talk about the women who have led us through. Oh, sorry, my shirt is crooked. This is an awesome shirt I got from um, USET. I hope you can see it. Let's see. It's really weird to try to get that straight in the camera. So feel free to comment and feel free to ask questions if you'd like. I'll try to address your comments as they come. And I may not be able to, of course, answer everything, but I will endeavor to do so. So thank you for tuning in and joining Native Wellness Institute today for Native Wellness Power Hour. We're super excited to be able to offer this to everyone every day. So I hope that you get a chance to tune into the many other amazing speakers, presenters, and Indigenous scholars who join with Native Wellness Institute each and every day and have done so for the past 3 months, which is really astonishing. So thank you for being a part of this. Now there are countless Native American women leaders historically and in contemporary times. Many of those leaders come from our communities and who were challenged not only because they were women in mainstream society, mainstream American society. uh, the challenge was to be viewed as a human being first and foremost, as a Native American person. There's an amazing book called I Am a Man about uh, a chief who had to go to court to prove that he was a human being. And I hope that you get a chance to read that. It's really an amazing book, the account of his life. Um, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some people that I think you might be interested in. And I hope that you enjoy this hour. We're going to intersperse our, excuse me, they're going to intersperse our discussion with readings from Native authors. And I hope that you enjoy them. And I hope that you have a fun hour with me and an informative hour, a time where we can learn and grow together. And feel free to share the live stream so others can join in. So, one of my heroes and just um, an amazing, amazing woman is um, is Deborah Parker. Now, how many of you are familiar with Deborah Parker? I hope that all of you are, because if you aren't, you should be. She's absolutely astonishing person. She was integral to the passage of the Violence Against Women Act, and because of her courage and her commitment to our women, this act was passed, and it helps protect women across the country. Deborah Parker is a Tulalip woman. She served on the Tulalip Board of Directors for quite some time. She is an activist, she is a mother, she is a community member, and an Indigenous leader. So she's close to me in age, not close enough to have been in high school the same time I was, but uh, we're in the same decade, I would say. And that's okay. It's okay. Deborah Parker's work stands for itself. Now, some of the people that I will mention, I will just mention a little bit. I really want you to look them up yourself and to find what it means to be um, one of what it means to look for leaders in your community and in yourself. I think that oftentimes leadership is thrust upon us. It's not something that we seek out. I try to avoid people who seek out recognition for themselves rather than helping their people. The point of being in historical times and contemporary, I would say, the point of being a leader is to lead. The point of being a Native woman leader is to fight prejudice. On our Native men leaders fight prejudice every day as well, but our women fight it twofold because in mainstream society, women are not as valued as men, and we all know this to be true. And this was true in historical times as well. So people like Sarah Winnemucca. Sarah was an amazing, amazing woman. She was born around 1844. She spoke 5 languages. She spoke English, Spanish, and 3 native languages, which is fascinating to me because sometimes I barely have command of the English language. Although I'm at this time learning Lushootseed through the Soxhawtla Indian tribe, and I have a grandson who is Soxhawtla, and my daughter is married within that community. So it's really exciting to be able to learn some of their to learn their language and to share that with others. So Sarah Winnemucca was the first Native American woman to have a book published. Her book, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims, was published in 1883. And a famous quote a famous thing that she said was, for shame, you dare to cry out liberty when you hold us in places against our will, driving us from place to place as if we were beasts." It seems so appropriate today as our nation celebrates independence to remember at what cost that independence came to Indigenous people. Now, Sarah was an advocate for Native American rights and land rights. She was just an amazing woman. And in 1879, she was lecturing in San Francisco. A year later, she met with the President of the United States. And she was a woman a formidable woman, a woman to be reckoned with. So, another woman to be reckoned with definitely was Lozin. And I don't know how many of you have heard of Lozin, but she was amazing. This woman warrior who was Apache, and oops, I don't think I told you. Oh, Sarah Winnemucca was Paiute. So Lozen had medicine. She had medicine that would um, make her hands tingle. So she would be able to tell when the enemy was nearby, and she could also tell how many of them they were and what direction they were in. So she was a valuable member of her people and of their efforts to protect their people and their lands. And Victoria said that she was as strong as a man. And she was really amazing. I hope that you take time to look her up, and I hope that you get an opportunity to learn more about each of these women. So I'm next going to read a passage for you, and this is from Joy Harjo's book, An American Sunrise, which is wonderful. Joy Harjo, another Native American woman leader, current poet laureate for the United States of America, and serving twice as poet laureate. She's been selected again this year to do so. So I will read from her book, Break My Heart. There are always flowers, love cries, or blood. Someone is always leaving by exile, death, or heartbreak. It's a timekeeper, music maker, or backstreet truth teller. Baby, 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 you can't say what's been said before, even though words are creatures of habit. You cannot force poetry with a ruler or jail it at a desk. Mystery is blind, but wills you to untie the cloth in eternity. Police with their guns cannot enter here to move us off our lands. History will always find you and wrap you in its thousand arms. Someone will lift from the earth without wings. Another will fall from the sky through the knots of a tree. Chaos is primordial. All words have roots here. You will never sleep again, though you will never stop dreaming. The end can only follow the beginning, and it will zigzag through time, governments, and lovers. Be who you are, even if it kills you. It will, over and over again, even as you live. Break my heart, why don't you? That was from Joy Harjo and her book, An American Sunrise. So the second poem I'd like to read from for you from Joy Harjo is called Washing My Mother's Body. I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. I returned to take care of her in memory, and that's how I make peace when things are left undone. I go back and open the door. I step in to make my ritual, to do what should have been done, what needs to be fixed so that my spirit can move on, so that the children and grandchildren are not caught in a knot of regret they do not understand. I find the white enamel pan she used for bread and biscuits. It is the same pan she used to bathe us when we were babies. I turn the faucet on and hold my hand under the water until it is warm. The temperature one uses to wash an infant. I find a clean washcloth and a stack of washcloths. She had nothing in her childhood. She made sure she had plenty of everything when she grew up and made her own life. Her closets were full of pretty dresses, so many she had not time to wear them all. They were brought by the young girl who wore the same flour sack dress to school every day, the one she had to wash out every night and hang up to dry near the wood stove. I pick up the bar of soap from her sink, the same soap she used yesterday morning to wash her face. When she looked in the mirror, did she know it would be her last sunrise? I move over pill bottles, a clock radio on the table by the bed, a pen, and set down the pan. I straighten the blankets over her to keep her warm for dignity. I start with her face. Her face is unlined even 2 months before her 80th birthday. She was known for her beauty. and when younger, passed for the Cherokee that she was through her mother and her mother's mother, all the way back to time's beginning. My mother had the iron pot given to her by her Cherokee mother, whose mother gave it to her, given to her by the U.S. government on the Trail of Tears. She grew flowers in it. As I wash my mother's face, I tell her how beautiful she is, how brave, how her beauty and bravery live on in her grandchildren. Her face is relaxed, peaceful. Her earth memory body has not left yet. But when I see her the next day, embalmed and in the casket in the funeral home, it will be gone. Where does it go? It is heavier than the spirit who lift up and flew. I think of it making the rounds to every place it has loved to say goodbye. Goodbye to the house where I brought my babies home, she sings. Goodbye to June's bar, where I was the shuffleboard queen. I cannot say goodbye yet. I will never say goodbye. I lift up each arm to wash. Her hands still wear her favorite rings. She loved her body and decorated it with shiny jewelry, with creams and makeup. I am tender over the burn scar on her arm from when she cooked at the place with the cruel boss who insisted she reach her hand into the friolator to clean it. She had protested it was still hot and suffered a deep burn. That scar always reminded me of her coming in from working long hours in restaurants, her uniform drenched with sweat, determination, and exhaustion. Once she came home and I was burning up with a fever. She pulled out the same pan I am dipping the washcloth in now, only she's added rubbing alcohol to bring the fever down. She washes tenderly, telling me about her friend Chunky, how she left her husband again, how she knows her old boss, a Jewish woman who treated her kindly, has cancer. She doesn't know how she knows, she just knows. She doesn't tell me that. I find it in a journal she has left me, a day book in which she has written notes for me to find when she is gone. I wash her neck and lift the blankets to move down her heart. I thank her body for carrying us through the tough story, through the violence of my father and her second husband. Her mother's mother died when she was born, and her adopted mother, another Cherokee woman, had no love in her heart for a tiny girl whose light hair betrayed her Indianness. Unlike the baby's older, darker sister, who would stay within their circle because her mother was not there for her. My grandmother did not know how to mother my mother. The story is all there in her body as I watch her to prepare her to be let down into earth and return all stories to the earth. My body memories rise up as I wash. I recall carrying my two children, rocking them and feeding them from my body, how I knew myself as beloved earth in that body. I uncover my mother's legs. I remember the varicose veins that swelled like rivers when my mother would get off a long shift of standing and cooking. They carried more than a woman should carry. A woman should be honored like a queen. Traditionally, we treated our women with that kind of respect, my Creek husband tells me. Ha! I laugh and ask him, then why aren't you cooking my dinner? I wash her feet, caress them. You will have some rest now, I tell my mother, even as I know my mother was never one for resting. I cover her. I make the final ring of the washcloth and drape it over the pan. I brush my mother's hair and kiss her forehead. I ask the keepers of the journey to make sure her travel is safe and sure. I ask the angels whom she loved and with whom she spoke frequently to take her home. But wait, not before I find her favorite perfume. Then I sing her favorite song softly. I don't know the name of the song, just a few phrases. One of those old homemade heartbreak songs where there's a moment of happiness wound through. And then I let her go. I hope you enjoyed this poem and this reading from American Sunrise by Joy Harjo, our nation's poet laureate for the second year in a row. So, just a smidge about Joy, some praise for her book. Fueled by deep musicality and an indelible spirit, the poems of Joy Harjo are at once voraciously inventive and powerfully human. These are poems that hold up to the truth and insist we pay attention. So, the words of our Native American women leaders resonate in their writings, resonate in their histories, and resonate in their lives and continue to resonate in our women today. Many, many years ago, I was really quite shy, and people who know me now don't believe that, but it's true. When you're shy, you have to push yourself if you want to accomplish things, and other people push you to accomplish things and to um, speak out and speak up. And sometimes it's hard to do that. Sometimes it hurts to do that. But when we do that, when we speak up and when we speak out, we are honoring our ancestors. When we allow them to speak through us, we are honoring their journey, their struggles, their battles, their strengths, their lives. Don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to speak your indigenous truth. I was in a 7-Eleven yesterday, and the clerk said to me after I purchased my products, he said, "Oh, happy 4th of July." And I said, "I don't celebrate the 4th of July." And he was startled. And I could see that he was not from our country by his accent and his um, appearance. And so I schooled him briefly and the people around me. I said, "I don't celebrate the independence of others, which came at the cost of my own people." And so he was quite surprised by that, but I could see that it gave him food for thought. He was going to think about that. So I'm happy about that. So when you're thinking about who your women leaders are, ask yourself, who do I look up to? Who do I listen to? Is it the work of Eloise Cabell? Is it um, the life and tragedy of Pocahontas and the true story of Pocahontas, not the Captain John Smith account of this supposed love story with a 12-year-old girl, which is awful. And I have heard that his first account of his adventures with the Powhatan Confederacy was too boring, and his editor told him that it needed a twist, it needed a love story. And so he changed his autobiography to reflect that. And in fact, that wasn't a possibility at all. The respect we had for our women at that time is legendary. And many of our women served as leaders, as clan mothers, as decision makers, as in so many roles, that mainstream America looks at with surprise. Oh, Native women did this, Native women did that, at a time when American women and European women were subjugated and treated as chattel and weren't allowed to own property. Some nations, when a man would marry in, uh, such as the Hopis, if the man was not a good husband, his belongings would be put outside the door and he would go back home for retraining, because a man should know how to treat a woman with respect and care and his role as a husband, and he should meet that role. So I just find stories like that fascinating. How were our women treated in your culture, in your community, and how should they be treated? Our women should be treated with respect, with kindness. our women should be protected from violence. Violence is not traditional, and our men should use their hands for love and for providing, not to hurt our women and our children. So there's another woman leader who's just fascinating to me. I don't know much about her yet, but I want to share her with you. Her name is Nanye Hai, and she was born around 1738. She belonged to the Wolf clan of the Cherokee Nation. And in 1755, while their nation was battling the Creeks, she was chewing the lead to make bullets for her husband's gun. And when he was shot and killed, she picked up his gun, she rallied the Cherokee, and she went in and fought in his place. And we hear those stories again and again across our nation of women who fought at the Battle of Little Bighorn and other battles. Our Native women are fierce. You you just don't want to mess with a Native woman who is protecting her own. We are just as fierce as the men, and we I say that with impunity because who bears the children? Who raises the children? The women do. The men have their role as well, and it's vital that our men step up and be fathers for our children. It's vital that our men set a good example of kindness and love and gentleness and of being free of alcohol and drugs. It's vital that we do that for our children. Yes, we have historical generational trauma, but we can break the cycle of violence. We can and we must for the benefit of generations to come. If we teach our children to be free of the mind changer of alcohol, the mind changer is what the Oneida Nation referred to alcohol as. So if we're able to free our children from that and offer them alternatives, healthy alternatives of culture, of cultural continuity, of pride in who they are and in their leaders, male and female. We remind them of the legacy that has been left behind. We remind them of the truth, our indigenous truth. And it's vital that our oral history, our stories, our people, it's vital that we share those stories with one another and with future generations. So Nanye Hai went on to marry a man named with the last name of Ward, and that's how she became known as Nancy Ward. She was chosen after the battle, she was chosen to lead the Women's Council, and she sat on the Council of Chiefs. She took part in treaty talks and promoted coexistence. Her efforts to promote peace were met with surprise by the European Americans, and she really wanted us to coexist peacefully. And she said, "Our cry is all for peace. Let it continue. This peace must last forever." And of course, it did not, unfortunately. In 1817, she fought against ceding more Cherokee territory. And of course, that was unsuccessful, and she passed in 1822. So now I'm going to share a story with you. And this is, well, it's not a story. It's, well, yeah, it is. Okay. So this is by one of my um, favorite relatives. I have many favorite relatives, but this is Suzanne Schoen Harjo, um, Good Indian, Bad Indian, from the book Shoot the Indian. And I hope you can see that. It's a terrific book. You can, I'm sure, purchase it online. So this is a great opportunity. I don't see if there's any comments. I'm sorry, let me bebop over. Let me see if I can, if you have any questions. if I can see those. There we go. Okay. I don't chat. Okay. I don't know if anyone is commenting. I can't see any comments yet, but if feel free to do so. And I look forward to hopefully reading your comments and to. Um, oh, apparently, I'm still learning. I can see. Oh, there's some. Thank you, Jilene. Okay. Oh, I found all the comments. They were hidden on the side. Thank you for your patience. Absolutely, Jillian. Don't be afraid to speak your Indigenous truth. And so I really appreciate people commenting, and I look forward to um, learning more about you through what you're posting. So, good Indian, bad Indian. Good afternoon. According to the program, my topic is old and new stereotypes. They're just stereotypes. The old ones are the new ones are the old ones. If you look back in headlines and in news stories from the earliest days of the American press, you find that whenever they wanted to call us something bad, they called us Redskins. And the R word continues to be that same kind of bad word that's used. Whenever they want to call us something awful, they call us that. Thank you, Dean. This is a great shirt. It's from USET, United South and Eastern Tribes. Now, why did they choose that term? Well, back in history, it was referred to the actual practice of skinning Indians. It was the actual practice of providing Indian pelts, Indian skins, as evidence for bounties for Indians killed. When the governors of the colonies put out their proclamations for bounties for Indians, they didn't say, just bring me an Indian, or tell me how many you killed, or bring me a scalp. That wasn't what they said. They said, we'll pay 80 cents, 60 cents, 40 cents. It was a sliding scale for men, women, and children. Now, how did they show it was a man, woman, or child? Through the whole body or through the skin and genitals. That's how the term came about. Now, that's something that a lot of white folks who are called Indian experts dispute today because they haven't found any paper that says we're going to start killing Indians in this way, and the term is going to derive from that practice of bounty hunting and bounty paying in precisely this way. And if you don't have paper on your side, you can't prove your case. There's no real regard for oral history, although the courts have shown great deference to Native peoples' oral histories. The Ninth Circuit, for example, was the court that affirmed the Bolt decision, which affirmed treaty fishing rights in the Pacific Northwest. It showed enormous deference to Indian oral history about fishing, where the fish came from on and off reservation, usual and accustomed fishing places, how we used to do it, and how we do it now, etc. But that has changed over time, and you see the same Ninth Circuit Court in the case of the ancient one, called Kennewick Man, saying, we don't like oral history. We don't think it stands up as much as the written word. The written word in America has been mostly used against Native peoples, and that's something that we need to understand and to counter. Everyone likes paper. Get paper and replace the paper that you have in your tribes with good paper, and keep in mind that words, words, words are important, important, important. So I am the person who will be snarky about the title of this conference. We shouldn't use words that diminish the importance of what we are trying to accomplish. A story is an opinion, but lesser. It's just your version of the truth. When you mean history and you mean to relate your history, say history. It is another word story that has diminished our authority, like myth and legend, when we mean religious history, when we mean ceremonies, when we mean the truth. Myth is something that is almost a lie, but it's a word that is so associated with Native peoples. Legend is so associated with Native peoples. We don't even skip or run or jump. We roam. Indians are roamers. We have to change these things that equate us with herds of animals. I don't mind being associated with animals, but it means something when other people look at us as something less than human. It's the opposite of what history instructs. We're not the ones who would agree to something, who would give something away and then take it back. We're the people that ceded lands and never got them back. But we did that for certain things that are being constantly taken away and taken away and taken away. And that has implications for today. Someone asked a question about the Abramoff scandal earlier. It comes from this Indian giver, from this less than, from this colonization in which we have been stripped of our identities, of our names and our nationhood, of our personhood, of our citizenship. We're called members rather than citizens. Our sovereignty is diminished by the language we choose. Excuse me, I'm more comfortable. In that way, we are colonized to trust the white people, even though we do not trust them. But we are colonized. We are socialized to have less trust in ourselves. And that's why we abdicate our advocacy to people in the face of evidence that they are doing something negative to us. We are our own best advocates. So I urge you not let your advocacy go to someone else, especially at the cost of anything over $1,000. And when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars, that's extraordinary. For what? For a seat at a restaurant that the guy owned? For a pat on the head? This is a byproduct of the terms of diminution that have been used about us and used by us so many times and used in the press to characterize us to the point where we believe it ourselves. In the recesses of our psyches, somewhere, we think that we are not equal to the Abramoffs of the world. We have bought into the lies that have been spread about us, the rumors that have been spread of us in the American press then and now. We are people who believe in our own victimhood, unfortunately, and who kind of live out that scenario rather than the people who know how to make war and who know how to make peace and who instruct about honor, who really live and can live honor. So these things are important to live, not just to think about on Saturdays or learn about in Tuesday classes, but to understand these words and images about us are directly tied to our future and the way that people treat us. It's directly tied to the way people give permission to behave toward us. At some point, if you're being treated badly, you have to stand up, no matter the cost, and say, you don't get to do that anymore to my children. You cannot do this anymore to my children. Enough is enough. That is the kind of thing that we need to do over and over and over again until we get it right. And we have to tell the American media, you don't get to tell these stories, these bad stories anymore. We're not the bad people you report in the press. I was amazed by the New York Times use of stereotypes in their recent series. The New York Times is a good paper, but the New York Times, when my great chief, the Cheyenne Peace Chief Black Kettle, was massacred by Custer on the orders of Sheridan, the New York Times celebrated the death, the killing of Black Kettle by saying, it's good that he and his whole ring are done away with. We celebrate this. That's the New York Times of old. The New York Times of today has more white glove racism, white glove reporting about the other. And it's our best paper. It's a wonderful paper. It's the paper of record, but it's been the paper of record about the bad news about us and reporting us as bad people when we are not, and making our great people something less than we are. At the same time, what you see happening, and this is so hilarious to me, is that the American media will elevate the people who are pretending to be Native peoples so that some of our most famous Indians are not Indians at all. Ward Churchill and Jimmy Durham and Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, all of these people have been totally debunked as Native people, as well as the person who wrote The Education of Little Tree. They're totally accepted and promoted as purveyors of knowledge about Native people and as the culture speakers about Native peoples. And why? Because they're so much like them. They've seen themselves. They haven't seen Indians, they've seen themselves, and they always gravitate to either the good Indians or the non Indians who are pretending to be Indians and elevate them and try to separate the hostiles from the good Indians. This is something that was done in a formal fashion from 1880 until the mid 1930s under the Civilization Regulations Act, where you would be declared a hostile or a troublemaker or a fomenter of dissent, or a ringleader if you practiced your religion, if you spoke your language, if you didn't behave like a civilized person, which meant Christian, English, short hair, no dancing. If you danced, the kill order from the Civilization Regulations Act could be given to someone else, saying you were not a good Indian. Or if you roamed off the reservation, it actually says no roaming off the reservation. If you went to your sacred place to worship and it was off the reservation, if you roamed over that way, you could be declared a hostile and killed. So it set up this bad Indian, good Indian paradigm that we are still suffering from. So be very careful about the people you see elevated very, very quickly. Often they're either the too good Indians or the non Indians who are very, very familiar because they aren't Indian in the first instance. We are people who oftentimes live out our stereotypes and pander to the worst stereotypes about us. Many of our people think there are only two choices. One is the good stereotype of the stoic Indian who is leading the people down the trail of defeat. So you have the Indian slumped over the horse. So that's one stereotype, the end of the trail Indian. The other stereotype would be the drunk in the gutter. So one is desirable, the other is undesirable. Where do you go? A lot of people don't know there is a middle ground, that the truth is in the middle. They think they have to be one stereotype or another. I've talked to many Indian young people who actually say, I didn't know you could be Indian and not drink. That's pretty sad. Fortunately, I've talked to many more who do know the difference, but that's a kind of internalizing of our own oppression and suppression and colonization that can manifest itself so easily. So don't buy into your own awful headlines. Don't believe the stereotypes, and remember there is no such thing as a good stereotype. For the Indians, don't be a good Indian. For the non Indians, pay attention to what the hostiles say. Suzanne Schoen Harjo, Cherokee and Hodogi Muskogee, is president of the Morning Star Foundation in Washington, D.C. She is a columnist with Indian Country Today, a poet, and founding co chairwoman of the Howard Simmons Fund for American Indian Journalists. She lives on Capitol Hill. Suzanne Schoen Harjo is an amazing woman whose life work has been to fight for the rights of her people, has resulted in millions of acres being returned to tribal hands, millions of acres of tribal land, which should have been ours to begin with, returned to us. So I really enjoy sharing words from our tribal leaders, sharing their own words. It's one thing to talk about them and when they were born and when they died and what they did, but it's another to hear their words. And I really appreciate being able to share these with you. So there is um, and there's so many, so many Native women leaders. Kara Briggs. I'm just going to read a short um, selection from the same book, Shoot the Indian: Media Misperception and Native Truth, which is edited by Kara Briggs, Ronald Smith, and Jose Barrero. Nation Building: The Fight for Native Women's Human Rights. For a moment in 2006, a moment as brief as a flash of lightning, Cecelia Fire Thunder captured the usually single minded attention of those on either side of the abortion debate. Fire Thunder is a plain spoken nurse who built a national reputation in the 1990s, teaching survivors of sexual abuse that sex can be good. Her stand was less an unsubtle play for attention than a misstep in candor, a step that cost her the presidency of the Oglala Lakota Nation. I traveled to South Dakota in early June of that year, ostensibly looking for fire thunder in the midst of the ferocious campaign to ban abortion in absolutely every case. The ban, which have made it a crime for doctors to perform an abortion, with no exceptions for rape or incest, has been passed by the state legislature early in the year in an effort to establish a national test case that would overthrow Roe v. Wade. With the landmark 1973 U.S. Supreme Court ruling out of the way, South Dakota strategists theorized states would be free to set their own abortion laws, laws which in the coastal blue states would likely stay much as they are today, laws that in the red interior states would probably send abortion rights to the way of the dinosaur. What I found on the back roads between Yankton, Rosebud, and Pine Ridge, underneath the handmade pro ban signs showing blonde haired Gerber babies, was a fabric of Native women, taking care of Native girls, taking care of each other. It's an epic story untold in media, whether mainstream or Indian. It's untold, I think, because women are not part of mainstream society's limited perceptions about who the mythic Indian is. So that again is from this collection, Shoot the Indian. And Kara is an associate director for the American Indian Policy and Media Institute. And she's an amazing woman. She happens to be a personal friend, and I value our friendship together. And boy, is this hour going fast or what? I know that some people are checking out. It's okay. You got other things to do. I totally get it. I hope that you share this to your page. I hope that you tune into Native Wellness Institute's Native Power Hours on a consistent basis. There's so many stories that need to be told, and so many Indigenous people ready to tell them. We just looked up and realized I only have about 10 minutes left, and um, I really had hoped to share more with you than I have. I'm going to throw some names out you of other folks I'd like you to look up besides, not just Sacagawea and Pocahontas, whom we know about, but maybe don't know the whole truth. Also, Ladonna Harris. Ladonna Harris is a firecracker. She is amazing. I am honored to know her. She currently serves on the board for National Museum of the American Indians, but she has been an advocate for women's rights since the 1960s. She is a fierce advocate. She also has been fighting for environmental issues her whole life. She served as United States representative to UNESCO, and she spoke only Comanche until she was 6 years old. She met her husband when they were in high school, Fred Harris, and they have 3 children. She helped him through college and law school, and then he was elected to the state senate for the state of Oklahoma. And then he was um, selected to the U.S. Senate, and she worked to combat segregation. She became a nationally recognized advocate for Native American people. In 1967, she was appointed by President Lyndon Johnson to lead the Native American Women's Advisory Council of the War on Poverty, which was focused on promoting civil rights and economic prosperity. And we can see from what's happening today in the news that battle continues. That battle continues each and every day. And we must not back down. We must advocate because our children and their children, unto the seventh generation, they're counting on us. They're counting on us to fight for their rights. Um, I have a funny story about Ladonna Harris. My husband Brian Patterson used to also serve on the Native American National Museum of the American Indians, and we were coming back from a meeting in New York City, and I was holding my husband's hand, and I stepped off a curb that was taller than average, and I twisted my ankle badly, just wrenched it. And who was behind me but Ladonna? So, so Ladonna grabs me, and she's shorter than me, and she's like, "Lean on me." And here's this icon, this woman whose work has change people's lives. This woman who continues to inspire, uh, asking me to lean on her. And so I had my husband on one side and Ladonna Harris on the other. And her friend said, "Oh, wait, let me take your picture." And I remember thinking as her friend stepped in front of us and I'm leaning on Ladonna and Brian and I can't even barely put my foot to the ground. And I'm like, why is she taking my our picture while I'm in agony? Why? So it was very funny, but she helped me back to my hotel and my husband and I blazed across the city looking for a boot for me to get me through the rest of the week. So LaDonna's activism is as simple as grabbing someone who's hurt and helping them when they need it, to advocating internationally. You don't have to be an international advocate. You don't have to be nationally known or internationally known. You don't have to seek that at all. Do what you can in your community, do what you can in your family. Teach your children, teach them to speak up and speak out. Teach them indigenous truth and decolonize your mind. This is so funny trying to get this in the camera. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to speak your truth. Your ancestors are listening. Your ancestors um, are applauding you when you do so. Read to your children. Read from these native authors. Share with them. Um, Joy Harjo and Maria Tallchief, the first Native American ballerina who was pushed to change her last name and she refused, and she became a prima ballerina and was amazing. You know, Sarah Winnemucca, Lozen, Suzanne LaFleche, the first Native American doctor, the first American to receive federal financial aid, which is fantastic. Terry Gobin, the chairwoman of the Tulalip Tribe's board of directors. She leads her people with honor and dignity. Winona LaDuke, who spent her life um, advocating for Native people. Sacagawea, kidnapped at age 12 and acquired and married to Charbonneau, who was a part of the Lewis and Clark expedition. But she saved them. She saved them, and she was an amazing woman. And she was someone we can look up to. Uh, it was kind of sad what she that her participation led to people coming all across the continent from one's manifest destiny from sea to shining sea, as they say. But if it hadn't been her, it would have been so many other people, right? There were expeditions lined up to study our land. So I have a couple more poems. This is from my book, Sweetgrass Talking, available on Barnes and Noble and um, Amazon, and available from the publisher, Uttered Chaos Press, or from me. If, anyways, my second book, Have War Paint Will Travel, is with the publisher right now. So I'm going to read you two poems, and then I think my time will be up. Uh, Maybe three. I'll push. Okay, this is called Storyteller. She walks with dignity into the arena. The director has called her. She has graciously agreed to share a few stories of her people, sharing them with those who take time to hear, those who are touched by her words, the ones who listen beyond the story to the lessons behind it. The reason for the story is masked, but there nonetheless. She shares it with all, but only the listening hear, smile and laugh, or learn. They see her time worn face, the countless laugh lines, the ready smile and open heart. She reaches out to all, but only a few can hear. This next poem was written for Rose Only of the Yakima Reservation. Native Bloom. Rose by name, Rose by heart. You can feel that come through from the start. With beauty unchecked by time, she is dignity and honor clearly defined. dancing with honor, moving with style and grace. The pride of her people shone on her face. She is a native rose, Rose is her name. She is a native woman, too strong to tame. I think that one just fits with what we're doing so well. So, in this time of upheaval and change that needs to come, change that we've been advocating for decades, change the name. Um, I'd like to read you this poem. It's called 1995. Save a fish, kill an Indian, said the bumper sticker, proclaiming from a white pickup. Welcome to the land of the free, where the fishing rights and treaties last as long as a whisper on the wind. Promises made to our grandparents for as long as the grass shall grow, as long as the rivers flow, or until we find something we want on your land. Uranium, oil, gold, all for what? For a land you cannot possess, only rent for a short time. How can you own the earth, the sky, the sun, the air that we breathe, that you are destroying day by day? Technology has brought us so far that some cannot leave their homes. Now we are all paying for your deeds. It is not too late to recover from all that has been wrought, not too late to live at peace with the earth and your brothers, brothers and sisters of all nations. Custer died for your sins, said a bumper sticker on a res car. So again, that's those last few poems were from my own writings. It's from Sweetgrass Talkings, the name of my book. And as we look at these turbulent times and we look at the battle for our African American brothers and sisters, for their safety and for treating them as human beings, their struggle is our own. What they're fighting for and what we are fighting for side by side with them is the respect that all of us are deserving of, and is the safety that all of us are deserving of. And I hope that you'll continue to advocate in your communities. I hope that you'll continue to raise your voice for disenfranchised people, not just ourselves, but all our relatives. So I thank you very much for tuning in to Native Wellness Power Hour, um, supported by Native Wellness Institute. And I look forward to seeing you at future presentations. And I hope that you have a blessed day and that you speak your Indigenous truth and that you live your Indigenous truth. I hope.